Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Herbalist. This is a 2-cost action card from Alchemy. It has an on-play effect that says +1 buy and +1 coin, and it has a below-the-line effect that says when you discard this from play, you may put one of your treasures from play onto your deck. So let's take a look at the on-play effect first, which is the top half of the card. So Herbalist has an on-play effect that is incredibly weak. Spending an action for just a buy and only 1 coin is really poor value for that action. Now, if you desperately need a source of plus buy, you will still buy Herbalist and play it, but you won't be very happy about it. This is what we call the plus buy of last resort, right? You would only really bother with Herbalist if there's nothing better to do instead. Herbalist might be the worst possible source of plus buy in the entire game. Right, plus buy is still useful, but this is just a really bad source of it. When you compare it to other forms of plus buy that cost 2, like Candlestick Maker and Ducat, like these are non-terminal, and the coin is in coffer form. Like these are way better cards when you compare them to Herbalist. And then you also have things like Pawn, which you can choose to be non-terminal if you wish. You know, there's a lot of flexibility with that. So you don't get that at all with Herbalist. So, yeah, it's just, compared to its peers, Herbalist, just very weak card. Now, due to its very low price, if you are going to predict that you're going to want some plus buy in your deck at some point, you may want to buy your Herbalist at a time when you happen to just have a turn with low money earlier on in the game, so that you can avoid overpaying for it later. There's nothing more feel bad than having to spend like 8 or 11 on a Herbalist, because, you know, that's a lot of wasted money that if you'd already had the Herbalist could have been spent on buying multiple cards and building quicker. So now let's take a look at the bottom half of this card, which is the top decking of a treasure from play. So in the general case, top decking treasures is probably the worst place to put them if you're trying to draw your deck each turn. We talked about this in the Bureaucrat video, but generally, the start of your turn, you really want to be maximising your chance of having good engine components so that you can start drawing your deck. Normally, there's a lot of decks where you have to try and get started before you can really start doing something on the turn, and that's the main challenge of avoiding dudding, is just getting that good opening. And once you start drawing your deck, you just become way more likely to be able to keep going. So top decking treasures, for the most part, tends to make that harder, and so increases your chance of having a dud turn. So the exception would be if you're not planning to draw your deck, like something that we'd call like a slog, like you might find where you go all in on Duke or something, like you're not going to draw, you are just going to try and fill your deck with like good treasures and just try and draw to a particular price point every turn. Or not draw, you just have a particular price point in your turn. However, it's worth noting that even in this case, you still need to draw the Herbalist alongside the good treasure that you want to top deck. And if you've got this slog deck where you're not drawing cards, that actually becomes pretty unlikely because you only see Herbalist with like 4 other cards at any given time. In addition to that, in a slog, you because you have such a limited hand size, you want to maximise the value of each card in your hand and not only really try and add strong cards to your deck if possible. And Herbalist has a very weak on-play effect. This is basically just a copper, right? A terminal copper sometimes. And if you're trying to get the most out of a 5-card hand, you don't really want one of them to just be giving you 1 coin, right? You could do better than that a lot of the time. So this means that most of the time, Herbalist's special ability is actually pretty bad for you, and you should just not choose to do it. Right? It is optional, so just don't, basically, is the answer. But there are exceptions. A Herbalist has some interactions with certain cards, and that's basically what the rest of the PowerPoint slides section of this video is going to be. It's just like lists of cards and talking about those, because there's not much else to say about Herbalist, really. So Potion, this is the obvious one. This is a special treasure that's in the same expansion as Herbalist. Normally with Potion, this is a restriction. You can only buy a potion cost card once per shuffle, per potion that you have. However, with Herbalist, there's the chance that you might be able to buy multiple because you get to reuse the potion during that shuffle. However, this is only meaningful if you're not planning to basically draw your deck and draw the potion anyway at some point, in which case you would rather not top deck it because you would much prefer to draw it later on while drawing your deck, where you're not hurting that initial reliability of kicking off your engine. So there are some situations where you might top deck a potion. This can include you suspect there's going to be like one vineyard left on your next turn and you really, really want it, so you just top deck the potion to guarantee that you see your potion so you can buy it. Maybe you want to trash the potion with Ratcatcher, which is a trash card that only gets to trash from your starting hand on a future turn, so you have to have it in your starting hand if you want to get rid of it. Early in the game, you cycle through your deck slowly, so maybe if for some reason you bought Herbalist and Potion as your two opening cards, you might draw them both on turn 3, but, this is pretty bad. It means you've got to actually open Herbalist and Potion, which is not a good starting set of cards, honestly. And Alchemist, before you can fully draw your deck, Alchemist gets to use Potion to top deck your Alchemists. It's the only other potion card that has an extra use for potion, and so this can be useful up to a certain point. Once you start drawing your deck, you usually want to stop top decking the potion because you would rather draw it at a later turn. Now, it's worth noting that historically, people have thought, Philosopher's Stone, Herbalist, there's a combo, right? You get to top deck the potion to buy more Philosopher's Stones, and then you get to top deck the Philosopher's Stones. But it's worth noting that Philosopher's Stone and Herbalist on their own is actually worse than just pure big money, which is just buying silvers and golds. Like, it is expected to lose more often than it is to win against that kind of strategy. So you really need something else for that to be good. So don't even think about it, is my advice. Like, Philosopher's Stone is just a really bad card. Like, this is not going to make it better. Crown, this is a special card and that is an action and a treasure, and it's basically like a throne room if you play it as an action card, but because it's also a treasure type, you get to top deck it with Herbalist. So this is the kind of card that you do want in your starting hand, because throne room can act like a village. If you have this and also like a cantrip, you got a village, right? Or you have this and a draw card and a village, you get to draw more. So this is a case where the actual top decking of Herbalist can improve your reliability rather than hurt it. And along similar lines, Capitalism can basically turn a whole range of action cards into something like Crown, where it's both an action and a treasure, and that means, like, if you have something like Mining Village or Bazaar, you can now top deck them with Herbalist if you buy Capitalism. So that's nice, I guess, as a reliability thing. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but hey, it's there. Fool's Gold. So this is a very cheap treasure that has an effective rush strategy when boards are weak. You can just buy a bunch of Fool's Golds, and ideally maybe there's some other things that help you with that, but you basically just want to be colliding together Fool's Golds as often as you can. Like, it's a pretty good payload. And when you don't have the ability to draw your deck and play all of your Fool's Golds, just getting a load of them very quickly and trying to play them a lot can sometimes be faster than other things that are available to do on the board. Herbalist is quite nice with this because the plus buy is actually useful for gaining multiple copies of Fool's Gold because Fool's Gold is so cheap, and also top decking the Fool's Golds gives you more odds of colliding them, which is what you really want to do with Fool's Golds, because each successive one played in the turn gives you 4 coins instead of 1, which is just a big amount of money. And you nearly need 3 Fool's Golds in a hand, and hey, there's a province. So top decking the Fool's Golds, lets you buy more, lets you top deck them. So Herbalist can be quite nice with that. And lastly, there is Capital from Empires. So Capital's got this 6 coins and +1 buy on it, which sounds incredible. But then at the end of the turn, if you discard Capital out of play, you take 6 debt. So in reality, it's not actually earning you any money overall. It's mainly used to try and treat other cards as debt cards and spike high price points early and that sort of thing. However, you can work around this with Herbalist because you get to choose the order that you discard cards in cleanup. You could choose to discard Herbalist first, and that lets you top deck the Capital, which is taking it out of your play area without discarding it, and that means that you never take the debt, and then Capital does become a very powerful card. You need a Herbalist for each Capital, but you are earning very significant amounts of money. This is a lot better than gold, and it's also giving you plus buy. The trade-off is that you are top-decking Capitals, but, this is a lot of money and it can work. So, yeah, don't sleep on that. And that's really it for Herbalist. Unfortunately, there is nothing else to really talk about because the card doesn't do very much and it's pretty weak. So, like a lot of these weak cards, it's just a list of like notable interactions is all you really care about. You try and avoid Herbalist whenever you can otherwise. So what we're going to do now is head over to the online client, generate some random kingdoms with Herbalist, and let's see if it's any good. So here straight away that we've got Chapel, which is really good at trashing. There is no village is a problem. So we have Ironworks and Caravan and Secret Passage to try and draw up. There is Lurker to also gain cards, but it feels worse here. There is Ghost Ship. So I was going to say maybe this is a Duke thing, but the existence of Ghost Ship makes it very, very hard indeed to actually run an effective like Duke Duchy slog. Because Ghost Ship is going to absolutely kick your ass. So I think what you have to do is trash down with Chapel, Ironworks a bunch of caravans, and look to play a single Ghost Ship every turn just to try and destroy your opponent if they do anything other than that strategy. Like if you could play Ghost Ship on your opponent, they can't do anything here. Right, Courtyard Big Money's not going to work. Duke is not going to work. What are they going to do? They can't. So that's kind of, I think, all you have to do, and then you're just going to try and buy a single province. You can't play Herbalist, it's the only plus buy, but you would much rather be playing Ghost Ship. So Herbalist is just useless here. There's nothing you are going to do. It's not going to work in a Duchy Duke slog because Herbalist in one hand, what are you going to do with against Ghost Ship? It's going to be terrible. You can't have effective turns. You just can't buy Duchy. You're going to miss it so often. So Herbalist is bad there. Doesn't get a chance. There's no village. Much better terminals to play. So, oh well. I mean, this is not unexpected. I do not expect Herbalist will be all that useful. So here we have another kingdom where I was going to say it's the only plus buy, but this is not true because there is Salvager. So here we have two villages with Fishing Village and Mining Village, and there is Torturer. And there is trashing with Salvager. Okay, so this is a Torturer engine. We want to pick up Salvager to try and get thin. We want to be buying Fishing Villages, Mining Villages, and play Torturer a bunch. And there's even Outpost, so you can really hit your opponent with so many Torturers between turns. Right, you only need 2, and then you can get 4 Torturer plays between turns because you get to play each one twice, ideally, with Outpost. You got Fishing Village for reliability with Outpost, and so that's pretty great. Now, would we want a Herbalist here? Well, once we're drawing our deck, Salvager might give us a plus buy, but the problem is we need to keep feeding it, and there's no other way to really gain cards. So it might be the case that actually eventually I do flip over to buy a Herbalist, just so I can get a source of plus buy that doesn't require me to chew up any cards. But it might be the case that I have to take a bunch of curses anyway, because maybe my opponent's going to try and torture me as well. And if that is the case, Salvager might have enough fuel to go on for the entire game. If you split the curse pile evenly with your opponent, you've got your 10 starting cards and 5 curses. That's 15 times you get to play Salvager and ideally have fuel for it. So maybe we just ignore Herbalist. I would only get it if I literally run out of fuel for Salvager, basically. Otherwise, it's just draw up with Torturer, play Outpost, buy a province, repeat. Maybe you only get 1 province. Maybe it's worth building up to double province. Is it worth building up to double province? I mean, maybe if my opponent has been crushed by curses with Torturer and they're going nowhere, you get the time to build up to double province. So anyway, Herbalist would only consider it here if, for whatever reason, I'm struggling to fuel Salvager. Otherwise, there is no top decking of treasures whatsoever going on this board. I do not care for that in the slightest. Here, what have we got? We have... so there is no trashing at all. There is no village. There is Artisan to pick up laboratories and wishing wells. So, we can draw our deck. But we only get to play 1 terminal, and Artisans feels like a really good one, and so does Militia. Given that, Herbalist I don't really care for the plus buy when I can just gain cards directly with Artisan. Feels much more effective. So I'm probably never buying Herbalist here. I just don't have the terminal space for it. And Artisan and Militia are way better. I'm going to open... man, you want to stop... I'm just thinking you really want to stop playing Militia after a certain point because you would much rather play Artisan, but it still feels nice. Like, I think... Do I really open Militia anyway? I mean, what's the alternative going to be? Double Wishing Well? Probably not going to hit 6 for Artisan with that. And I think you have to open Militia, right? You open Militia and probably Wishing Well. Like, maybe Vassal's okay here at a certain point. Like, Wishing Well helps protect Vassal and make it a little bit more viable that we get to play it, but we don't want that many. But otherwise, we just want to draw as many cards as we can and basically play Artisan every turn to pick up more of these and keep drawing. And eventually, we flip over to Province, and who knows, we may even be able to... Actually, Vineyard is very hard to get here. I was going to say you could Artisan a potion, but then how do you buy the Vineyard? Maybe you can't Vineyard. I'm just thinking, how good is it going to be? It's not going to be as good as 1 province per turn if you can get that to a consistent state and keep artisaning like more laboratories and top deck a laboratory for next turn. So I think we just ignore Herbalist here because there's just better things to do. The lack of a village really hamstrings this deck, so you can only really do so well. And honestly, I think just getting up to a single province, gaining more of these nice cards is good enough, really. So... yeah, I would only really consider Vineyard if I was behind. I get to then buy Vineyards rather than provinces. In fact, that's a question. Would you rather spend your buy every turn buying a bunch of Vineyards rather than provinces? And you can Artisan, like, keep gaining action cards. Well, there's only so many action cards you can really support, I guess. Like, if you get 5 laboratories, 5 Wishing Wells, and Artisan... your Vineyards are going to be 3-4 points, and then how many more can you feasibly shove into your deck? Warehouse is nice, but like Vineyard's probably never going to be as strong as Province, so I'd probably just go Province. Think about it. Anyway, Herbalist, no. Can't support Herbalist in this deck. No Village. Here we have Stewards to trash. We have Mining Village and Diplomat as villages. We have Smithy as draw, and also Steward and Diplomat as well. So we got an engine. We got everything we need for it. We got plus buy with Herbalist, but also Pawn, which is probably better. There is Sea Hag as an attack, which is okay as an attack here, I guess. I mean, Steward's pretty good at trashing, so maybe it's not so good. What would I want to open with here? Oh, there's Smugglers as a gainer, which is also quite nice. I'm just thinking, can we ever kick off Diplomat as well? And we can with Pawn. We can take like action buy with Pawn, and then we can like kick off Diplomat. So that's really nice as well. So what do we open? Well, we're definitely opening Steward. What do we open alongside Steward? Is it Smugglers? Probably not. Is it Pawn? Like, just to get that going? Maybe. Like, maybe we open... Like, we don't want to hit 5 here is notable. Like mine, we don't care. If we ever need a huge influx of cash, there is Treasure Map to do that later on after we've trashed a load. So we're not worried about hitting 5. So we can open Steward. I don't really like opening Sea Hag, but maybe that's what we do. We open Steward and Sea Hag. I mean, it feels pretty rough. We'll certainly be upset if our opponent then opens Steward Diplomat and we get to trigger the Diplomat. They'll cycle very, very quickly if we do that. But I don't really care for silver either. I would rather... Maybe we just get the Mining Village, like, just so we have it at cost 4 early, so we can eventually play 2 Stewards, and that gets us to 4 for treasure maps. Like, but we do need a village at some point, and maybe we just won't hit 4 again. So maybe that's what we do. We actually open village. There you go. We're doing it. We're doing the village open. Anyway, Herbalist is only useful here as a source of plus buy. Eventually we might treasure map to gain a bunch of money, and then draw our deck, play Stewards for the rest of the money. That's double province, and we plus buy. So this is just buy of last resort. We're probably getting a Herbalist, but we're not very happy about it. Kind of sucks. but, that's what we do. So there you go, there was a board where we actually did use Herbalist, but we're not using it to actually top deck treasures. Here we have Apprentice for trashing. There is no village, so bridge is quite sad with no village. There is mill and library, but that ends your turn, so that's not very good without a village. What do we even do here? So there's... it feels like there should probably be an engine here, but it doesn't actually feel very good. Trashing is very slow. Like there's laboratory, which is nice, but is a fairly slow improvement to your deck. You only get to play one terminal, so it's going to be bridge, or it's going to be merchant ship, or it's going to be smugglers. Like, man, I don't know. Or it's going to be library, but that doesn't feel very good. It's certainly not going to be Herbalist. Like, I would much rather play Bridge than Herbalist anyway, with my single terminal action. So Herbalist is straight out the window. Like, Bridge is obviously way better than Herbalist. I guess we want an Apprentice anyway, and a bunch of laboratories, and then we can consider, like, is 2 merchant ships going to be better than, like, a single bridge that we try and play every turn? Like, maybe. We're not really going to be making that much use out of the extra buy from bridge, I don't think. So, at that point, it's just a terminal silver. Do we care? Maybe merchant ship is just better then. Like, this might actually be a merchant ship board just because there's literally nothing else to do. You buy a bunch of laboratories. Like, we just want all these 5-cost cards. We want Apprentice, we want laboratory, we want merchant ship, probably. Like, it feels terrible. Smugglers might be better earlier on, just to try and get more laboratories or more mills. So maybe I open Smugglers and Mill, and I use them to try and get to Apprentice, and hopefully I get to smuggle a bunch of labs or mills. Those seem like decent cards. The smuggling the mills is important, because it's just extra, like, tiebreaker points, which will be quite nice. Yeah, so no Herbalist here. So there you go. So that was 5 Kingdoms. Herbalist was only used in one of them, and it was only because it was literally the only buy, and we wanted plus buy. And that's pretty typical for Herbalist. Like, there aren't any particularly good combos yet in the expansions that we're looking at, so I just wouldn't expect to really see it be used except for last resort. So there you are. Thank you for watching. I hope that was useful, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.